Okay, awesome. So, how are you guys doing? Good? Okay, cool. I'm gonna cover some texture mapping and placing context, people and birds and whatever. And then Alex will come back for some final touches, final moves, overtime kind of effects. Okay, so this is what the proxy looks like. Alex was gracious to render this for me yesterday. So, and this is what the final output looks like. So again, we cannot stress enough, do not go crazy like this on your stuff. Actually, Branko just wants you guys to have your proxies rendered in ambient occlusion and like just focus on the proxies. So, but yeah, the texture mapping is for like Maria said, later in your life, which is like tomorrow. Anyways, yes, I am recording. Thank you for that, though. Thank you, because I could have forgotten. Okay, awesome. So, so basically, what I've done is get a background image that sort of creates a context for my object to sit in, and usually you would want to render your object, or you would want to find an image and then render your object to like sort of fit the perspective of that image. But you can go the other way around. I actually got the image, the render first, and then searched like 1,000 images to find one. Okay, and so let's just walk through the Photoshop layers. So I'm gonna turn all of those up. Oh, okay, cool. So this is the original image. How many of you guys know this place? Yeah, cool, okay. If you're going on the LA trip, chances are you're gonna visit it. So, really cool place. And then I just bring the object in. Let's make that normal. Clean the edges, wipe it out, wipe out the base, and then I multiply that. And then I start to overlay my 4, and then I cut stuff out. I'm gonna walk you through the step. I'm just showing you layers. So, and then I put some blend modes, screen, pin light. I overlay the object again to get shadows on the 4 that I have placed in. Okay. And then I add shadows. And then shadows of people, and then people, and then birds. Very important. Just kidding. Anyways, actually there's like the up close birds, and then there's like the ones in like the sunset, just for like visual effect, you know. And then light. So Alex is going to dwell more on the lighting effect and other finishing touches. And then I had this like image that I overlaid to like just make it pop a little, and then I did like a desaturation gradient. So I'm gonna walk you guys through all of that. Oh, I like that. That looks cool. I also like this. I was just playing around with a couple of stuff. Okay, so let's open a new file. You want to make sure that you set the size of your image to however many pixels that you're going to be needing. I think we went over how to calculate the pixels you need. Do you guys remember how to do that? Should I go over it again? Is that yeah, go over it again? Yeah. Okay, good. I can't really tell what you guys really need. So if you have 17 by 11, as your placeholder size for your text, like the actual size, print size of your image, and you want to print at 150 pixels per inch. All you need to do is multiply 11 by 150 and 17 by 150. And I don't know what that is in my head, but if you did that with your calculator, that would give you the vertical pixel size and the horizontal pixel size. Does that make sense? So like Branko, I think Branko advised that you guys use 300, so maybe just multiply that by 300 and go with that. Okay, so I'll set that, I'm gonna use 150. Click OK. So let's import the first image. Let's see, where's that? Yeah, that's this. I'm just gonna bring that in and drop that. And if you have any question at any point, please let me know. Feel free to stop me. And then let's bring in the proxy. Okay, so first thing is I'm gonna drop that, and then I'm gonna make that a little more transparent, just so that I can place it properly. So with this, okay, so with this image, since I'm placing my object in the center of the image, I want to make sure that it's placed in the middle third of my image, somewhere around the middle third of my image. Make sure that the base of the proxy is close to the edge of the last third of my image. So I'm going to shrink this down a little, just so it looks right there, right? Somewhere around there. You've also, like, the image is pretty much symmetrical, so you've got this bench and that bench. You can also just use that to sort of align the proxy. That might not be the case for many of you, but basically look for things you can use to sort of set a datum for your object. So let's just drop that there. And then I can take the opacity back to 100. And then the next thing I want to do is, first of all, duplicate that, just because I hate re-importing. And then I'm going to erase the base. So select an eraser. And let's use a 50 first. Actually, let's use 100. Get rid of the edge. Okay. And then I'm going to change back to a 50, just so that I have a really nice sort of gradient. That's too much. And let's zoom in. I'm going to reduce the size of the brush to get that edge. Let's make that 30 now. Alex was actually telling me yesterday that the best opacity to use for a brush if you're going to blend is 30. 30? 33. Very, very precise. I didn't know that, but it actually works pretty well. So let's just use that too. Okay. I'm going to close some of these files. No. I'm going to leave that. Okay. So I think this is good. The next thing I want to do is bring my 4 in. And I went ahead and downloaded like a bunch of 4 images. I like this one. I'm going to use that. I think that was what I used. So, okay, let's just drag that and drop it in. Again, I like to duplicate and then hide that. Is everyone good? Okay, let's reduce the size of that. And when you're reducing it, you want to make sure that the scale is somewhat proportional to the size of the proxy, like the size of the object. I think that would look proportional enough. I'm just going to click enter. And now what I want to do is I want to tile that. So I'm going to drag, I'm going to click Alt and then drag to make a copy of that, and Alt Shift down to make sure that it's aligned. And basically what you do after that is you use 33% opacity with an eraser on the image on top. and then you just erase that edge away to blend it with the one underneath. So if you did that, so it blends really nice. And I'm gonna go ahead and just copy that, blend. Yeah. Uh-oh. Okay, copy that. Actually, let's put that underneath. I'm just gonna increase the size of that so it sits. I'm just gonna clean off any hard edge. So let's bring the original image up, and I'm gonna shrink that down. It's pretty much a repetitive process. Okay. So you'll notice that the 4 has a dark side and a light side, and since I'm around the midpoint of the object, I might want to flip that image, the 4, around. So let's just flip that horizontally so that I can have light sides, like highlights in the middle, and then another set of dark edges at the right edge. So put that there. Okay, I'm just going to go through this very fast. Let's clean that up. Yep. Drag, drop, erase. So if you do it really well, you maybe you maybe shouldn't be able to see the seams. Like right now, I can still see the seams, but it's just going to require a lot more time. So let's get that somewhere here, and let's just do 3 at the same time. I'm going to go with the first one. Erase that. And pull that up a little. And then let's go to the second one. Get the edges off. And the third one. Okay. Okay, let's just copy those. And now I can just flip back again so that I have another dark edge. I mean, it doesn't really matter, whatever. Just copy that. Okay. And erase. And the last one. Okay, so now once that is all done, just select all of the layers that you've created and right click and merge layers. And now you have these layers on top of the object. Let's do like a 50% opacity so we can see. Okay, cool. So you've got that, and the next thing that we want to do is select create an outline around our object that we're going to use to trim that texture. So I'm gonna hide the texture, and then I'm just gonna use the lasso tool, polygonal lasso tool, and I'm gonna select around my proxy.
Your edges already defined, you can control click on the thumbnail and if you select the outline.
Sorry?
If you like hold control and click on your layered thumbnail, in your layers.
Oh, right.
And then just unselect the bottom of it.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot faster, especially when you curves.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just cut that. Oh. Okay, cool. Yep, we got that. And then let's hide this. I'm gonna save that selection so I don't have to do it again. 4. Okay, and now I'm just gonna select, right click and select inverse and delete. Actually, no, let's mask it. Sorry. Okay, so let's try that again. A mask, cool. So selection and just click on the masking layer and it automatically creates a mask for you. Yeah, that's cool. So the next thing that I want to do is go into that masking layer and try to soften the edge of this, because like a 4 would realistically not have that hard edge. So to do that, I'm going to use a brush, right click, and your Photoshop should come with this grass brush. Okay, and so you notice that in your masking layer, anything that is black is transparent, like is made transparent, and anything that is white is made opaque. So we're going to use a white brush. Use a white brush. Using our grass brush, we're going to paint on the masking layer. So just make sure that the masking layer is selected. Let's zoom in. Sorry, I'm supposed to use white. What am I doing wrong?
Not on the layer mask, you're on the.
Right. Why is that happening? I have white selected. Okay, let's try that again.
After you get the fur down, can you just like duplicate it and just paste the
Sorry?
After you draw like the grass stuff, can't you just like duplicate what you have right now and then kind of like overlay
Yeah, let's see.
on white there?
Okay, that should work without. This is 100% opacity. I'm not sure why that's happening. Okay, anyways, regardless, let's we can use another method. So instead of using the brush and having that overlay on the masking layer, we can use a clone stamp. So select the clone stamp, same thing, just go down, select the grass brush. And with the clone stamp, it's a little different. So what you have to do with the clone stamp is you have to select a portion of the image that you want to clone. So let's just hold down Alt and select that portion, and then we can start to paint over. I'm going to reduce that brush size.
Got your layer mask on, so it will draw.
Sorry?
Got your layer mask on, so it will draw outside the shape on that layer.
Right, that's why we need to use a layer mask. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, I'm gonna rasterize that. Or just merge with a new layer. Okay, so just create a new layer, select that, and merge layers, and it just makes it one layer. So, and now I can use the clone stamp. Let's try that again. Okay, cool. Right. So just do that. And you maybe want to rotate the brush as you go on so that it aligns with the edge of the proxy. Okay, let's do that. And just for you guys to note, this is the same way you would treat a grass texture if you add that in your render. So you'd want to soften the edge of the grass texture with the clone stamp. Okay, let's just do that very quickly. Rotate that. Okay, let's do the bottom. I'm gonna leave that tail alone.
Are you continuing to press Alt to get a new reference?
Yes, so each time you want to get a new reference, you hold down Alt, and then you see that like target mark. And then you click, and you get a new reference point. Just do that very roughly and quickly. Okay, that's good enough. So the next thing I want to do is, now this is really flat the way it looks, and you want to make sure that it has the same, kind of like the same depth with shadow and light as like the original render does. So I'll just duplicate that original render, bring it up. Actually, before I do that, let's hide this. I'm going to multiply this one on the base. And I'm multiplying it because I want the shadow to read as like shadow on the wood texture on the ground. But right now, if I do not multiply it, it just reads as like a gray color on that. So if you multiply that, it would read more like a shadow. It would allow the texture to also to like show beneath that. So let's turn that on. Let's turn the 4 on. Okay, and now we're gonna take the 4 and we're gonna multiply that over the texture. And now you can start to read some like shadow depths and all of that. Something that I noticed when I was doing this yesterday was this black outline that you have on the object, and it does not look cool. And so one way to get rid of that is to go to layer, select the layer, which would be the multiply layer of our original proxy render, then go to layers and go to matting and remove black matte. So you might want to run that like a couple of times. Well, it does it on the first run, but sometimes you might still have that and you just want to like do it a couple of times or 3 times to get rid of the black outline. Okay, now that we've gotten rid of that, let us now play around with some blending tools. So I'm going to duplicate that 4 again, bring it up, and let's try a screen on that. I'm going to make that like, say 50% opacity, or even more, like lighter than that. So we want to be able to read the shadow beneath it, but we also want it to like pop a little. I also tried like a pin light. Let's see what effect that gives. Where is it? A pin light. Okay. Yeah, I guess it just like highlights some part. Could mess around with different layers of like blend techniques and see what effects they give you. Okay, I'm gonna reduce the shadow. Oh, let's turn that off. Okay, so that looks good. And let's just go back here and see what other layers we have. Turn that off, turn that off. Okay. All right, so now that we have the object, the light source is from behind the object. So you want to make sure that you are sort of animating the shadow to depict that. And when you look at the building and the stools, they have like shadows like just right in front, like pointing towards the camera. So to do that, you can, and maybe you don't necessarily need that on this, but for future reference, what you can do is duplicate one of the layers that you have. I'm just going to duplicate the 4. I'm gonna bring in a hue/saturation, and I'm gonna apply that to only that 4 layer. And to do that, I'm gonna click Alt and just drop my cursor on that little icon. So let's go there. I'm gonna make that dark. Turn down the saturation, colorize, make it black, turn down the saturation. And I'm going to merge that with my 4 layer. And I can double click on that and then go into overlay, color overlay, and just like apply a black color overlay onto that. Why isn't that showing anything? Oh, I think it was, sorry, that was transparent. So let's do that again. Duplicate, I'm gonna make it 100%. And let's just double click and do the color overlay. Okay, awesome. And now we have a black color overlay. And I'm just gonna use a Control-T to transform that. And if you right click and you distort, you can drag that down and just pull it in this way. Depending on how far your shadow needs to go, you can pull back and forth. And let's do a little bit of perspective to pull out the edges so that it sort of goes with like the camera lens distortion. So, okay, let's do that. And then lastly, we're gonna go to filter and we're gonna go to blur. And we're gonna use a Gaussian blur to get rid of the rough edges. I'm gonna make that like, I don't know, 29, because you don't really see any hard edge because of the ambient light. Yeah, let's just like 31. That's good. And then just multiply that. Reduce the opacity. And yeah, that looks better. Okay. The next thing I want to do is bring in people. And I got a few cutout people. Let's see, where are they? Oh, good. So I had like some PSD people. And like you can really just go to Google and like search out cutout people. Another source, good source for that is Pinterest. You can find like various people. I got this from VI Shopper. and here they've got like free people that look good. So just browse that. Let's drag that in, drop that here.
There's also a website called Mr. Kayak. You guys are aware of that one?
What is it called?
Mr. Kayak. You do free accounts, and there's a certain amount that you can actually get for the day. But they're high quality images, and they're
Right.
very good library.
Yeah. I would make a library of the sussies, and like you guys should like Google make libraries of the sussies. So let's just drag those people in and place them here. I'm gonna Control T and scale this person. So one thing to take note of when you're putting people in your render is there is usually a camera high level, like a level where the shot is taken from. That's like your camera level. And in this image, it's like it's at the midpoint, so it's like where the horizon is, which would be, if you were to put a grid, that would be around here somewhere. You can just eyeball it. So having that in mind, you want to make sure that every people figure that you bring into your render, their head is sort of like on that level. It's not above that level. So like, if this person's head was above that level, then it becomes unproportional. And so their feet can basically be wherever. So if I adjusted their legs, like that just means they're further away. But as long as their head keeps that height, you're good. Let's bring in one more person. And then we'll just do the same thing, adjust the height. Okay, I'm gonna put that away. So let's do that. So yeah, we have the heights all aligned to the eye level that we're working with, and then I put some birds in, gives life to your render. Maria mentioned something about the size of the bed. It's usually tricky knowing what size to sort of use, but just, I don't know, eyeball it, see what it looks like. Those look really big, so I'm just gonna do that. And then the last thing that I did was create a new layer. Wait a minute. Oh. Okay, I'm just gonna copy all of that and drag it back into the original file. Okay, cool. And so one of the last things that I did was create a new layer, and this is just to touch up the object with like the light, the same kind of light effect that you're bringing from the back. Alex is going to go into some more tricks with like light effects, but this is just a very simple thing. So just use a very soft brush, and let's increase the size of the brush. And I would make this a color dodge. And I usually like to go with something around the beige. It just looks cool. So let's just try that. Let's use a 30% opacity. Actually, I'm going to increase the brush. Let's be 800. Okay, cool. And then do like that kind of thing. You might also want to select, since we have the flood of light coming from the back, that means that there will be light flooding in from the sides of this thing. So you could like do a selection of like the edge of that thing and just like take the brush and paint into that. Oh, that's too bright. So I'm gonna Control Z. Let's use a 10 and let's just paint there. And then if you deselect that, and you can go to filter, apply a blur on that, use a Gaussian blur, softens out the edge, and yeah, generally that should look good. The last thing that I'm going to touch on is sort of applying an overall layer that gives it more depth. So what I would do is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to hold down Control Shift Alt and E. So hold down Control Shift Alt and then press E to create like just like a snapshot of everything you have. And I'm going to turn that to a black and white image. I'm just going to go to Adjustments, go black and white, click OK, and then let's use some levels on that. Yeah, let's bring the black in a little, make the whites pop, and I'm going to overlay that, multiply. Oh, sorry. No, just make that normal. I'm just going to select the level and select the layer, and I'm going to merge that to make it one layer, and then I'm going to multiply that layer over my image and just reduce the opacity to like, I don't know, 30, 40. Try it out, see what works. But it just makes it look like an HDRI edit. Right, so that would just be like the difference between that. So Alex, do you want to come up and show some of that?
Guys, because I know we're getting close to the end of the class. I'm just going to talk about some light effects and quickly to go through. I guess, is your mouse not? Thanks. So one of the ways that you guys have probably typically created light beams, I'm not sure how familiar you are, but if you select a certain area on your scene, you're able to create, if you go into curves, you can kind of create a curve that you can then adjust and kind of create a beam of light in a certain area. It doesn't quite work in this rendering, but for ones where the sun is coming from the side, a good method is to, so what I did was I traced this outline, I went down to the corner here, and I went to curves, which just created kind of like an overlay map on top of the image that already exists. Then if I go up to filter, and I go to, if I go up to filter and I go to blur, and I do a Gaussian blur, I'm able to get rid of that hard line that was pre-existing, because that really doesn't exist with light beams. And then once you have this kind of initial beam, if I Alt Control, I can kind of start to overlay other beams and kind of start to create a layered effect. Now I'll just do one more that's a little bit different from what was going on before. And if I go back into curves, generate the curve, lift up or lower the light, and then do a lighter Gaussian blur, I can start to kind of create little kind of beams within beams that you can then start to overlay onto onto the scene below. Though actually, because it is a curve, you can play around with some of these different values. Like if you go into soft lighting and hard lighting, and playing around with the opacities, you can start to kind of create that that lighting effect. And I'll bring this guy back up. But typically, when you're just working with the curves, it's mainly opacity that you kind of have to work with in this case, and just kind of bring it back in that way. Another real cool and common technique is, have you guys ever used lens flares before? Because it's kind of a nice way to create kind of a sun flare effect in the scene. Because as we can see here, the sun seems to be coming from this area of the scene. So if you create a new layer and you map it all in black, And we'll bring back the opacity so that we can see the image behind. And if you go under Filter and Render, you'll see Lens Flare. And then this menu will pop up, and you'll be able to, sorry, don't know why I just chose that one section of the drawing. But, oh well, we'll make do. But with the lens flare, you're able to adjust the brightness as well as the type of flare. And so we'll just choose this guy here. And then that flare will appear in the corner where it was before. I'm not sure why, typically when you create this entire screen, your lens flare will kind of appear in the area, like your entire render appears on the tree. It's probably because of an issue with the back. Yeah, no, I'm getting to that. So right now you have this mapped out on the black background, which then if you go into your overlays, you can select screen, and once you do that, your lens flare appears kind of in the underside, and you can manipulate and move that. Typically, when you go into the filter, your entire scene shows up, but for some reason during this demonstration it didn't. But we'll just make do. But and what that does is it just kind of brings the light from the scene to kind of create a little bit more of a gradient between where the sunlight should be coming from and the rest of the image. So I'll just that quickly. And you can always kind of erase on the side that's supposed to be darker if the screen doesn't quite do it for you. It just kind of creates that solar effect. And then, of course, you can manipulate and go into your options. I don't know if you guys have explored these, but they're very, very useful because color balance, hue and saturation, and levels are all kind of paramount to making sure that each individual object basically fits into the scene. So if you want something that like a little bit of a warmer hue to the lens flare, you can kind of manipulate that that light effect just by toggling between the CMY options that are in the color balance.
Which
kind of-
layer did you double click to get that on?
So what I did was I clicked onto the layer that the lens flare was on. I went down to the options and I went to color balance. And once you click onto that, you get this option box up here. And if you look at where my mouse is right now, this little toggle with the arrow going down, that's you click onto to make it specific to the layer below, rather than your entire scene going red or green. So those are two kind of common techniques to create light in a scene. The one final one, which is one that I use quite frequently and I find kind of cool, is kind of a light that radiates out. It's usually used for like a corner light, but what you do is you get your brush. I'll just reduce the size. And I usually use a brush that's a bit thicker and more triangular. Brush 60 will work for me. And I'll go get a slightly brighter color for this demonstration. And just for the sake of this this topic, we'll say that the light is coming from this corner here, though you can have it radiating out from the center. It's just right now there is already a lighting effect going on there. And if you just kind of map out, we'll make that 30. Also, if you happen to be clicking on kind of existing areas, it doesn't quite work. well, yeah, there we go. So right now I have a very soft brush tool going on these guys here at 33 and just kind of dotting out where I kind of want these light beams to go. And then it's just as simple as going into your filter. Might make a couple of heavier ones as well. And then if you go into your filter and you go into your blur, you can go into your radial blur. And what this does is if you drag this over to the top corner where your light source is, and you turn the amount quite a ways up, you're able to start to kind of create, if I didn't have the opacity so far down, if it was at 80 or 100, you'd have something a little bit more to work with. But you're able to kind of layer these streams of light, and then you can filter it again so it's a little bit more evident. And we'll merge these guys here. So it was the radial filter. So I'll just do one more, a little bit darker for you guys. But I'll do a very kind of basic one because everyone's always looking over my shoulder in studio when I'm doing this, and they're like, "Oh, what's that?" I go, "Oh, it's my son." And I always get a few looks, but it's for a good reason. There's method to my madness, and we'll turn this way up, and you can kind of see, like, you can kind of get that radial view, and you can do it multiple times to get the effect that you like. As well as if you add in whites and blues, you can kind of create a really nice kind of overlaid effect that can help the solar effect of your render. I would layer it to the degree where it no longer reads. It's just kind of streaks, but just kind of subtle moments of light. So that's really it, guys, when it comes to some of the last light effects. Lens flare is a big one, as well as the radial blur, and then of course the mapping out individual streams and then overlaying those to create that effect. All right, I think that's good for us. We will